You don't have to keep living from someone else's truth. And certainly if it's not serving you, you can totally choose to live your own story and to rewrite your own story.
The first step seems to me to start taking accountability.
That is definitely the first step, is bringing the awareness and responsibility to yourself and start to ask yourself, where is this my story and how am I creating that and what am I choosing for myself?
How do they maintain that higher vibration, or where they are and the things that they've achieved, instead of, I guess, relapsing?
It's not about really kind of fixing yourself, but rather it's about unbecoming what you're not and just coming back to who and what you truly are.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator, a podcast about growth, mindset, and entrepreneurship. Today, we chat with holistic health counselor Helen Levine. Helen is a certified holistic health coach who is celebrated for her fusion of personal insight, empathy, and wisdom. She empowers others to rediscover their authentic selves, embrace inner truths, and craft lives brimming with fulfillment and purpose. She's also the author of the new book, Unhack Yourself, and she'll tell you how to get out of your own way and live with abundant joy. Before we start the show, just a quick ask. If you enjoy Common Denominator, we'd be grateful if you subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. It helps promote the show, and it helps us get great guests. Thanks so much, and now, here's my conversation with Helen. Hi, Helen, and welcome to Common Denominator.
Hi, Moshe. Thank you. Excited to be here.
So I love that idea. Basically, all of us humans experiencing this world have all been hacked. What does that mean?
Yeah, that was actually kind of a download I received as I was looking for a name for my book. And the book was written for over a decade. And suddenly in the middle of the night, this past year, 2023, I wake up from something. I write it down because I knew it was like pushed to write down. And then I wake up in the morning and I'm like, what was it that was coming through for me? And I read Unhack Yourself, and suddenly, boom, everything in the book aligned. And I realized that that's the whole notion that I've been trying to express to humans just outside of my clients and all of my clients over the years, is this realization that we have all collectively been hacked, and individually, whether we are aware of it or not. And majority, I think people just are not. It's the way that we are born. We're born perfect and complete. And we come into this reality as this baby without any preconceived notions, any ideas or ideals, or any kind of patterns. And then the society and family and all the well-wishers and educators and all the systems that we're a part of end up programming who we are. And so from birth, and even before birth, because we come from lineages and generations who also instill their patterns, ancestral patterns and wounds that are also in our unconscious programming. And so all of those ways end up hacking who we are, this authentic person, soul, being underneath all of the programs. And I realized that the whole way that I've transformed my entire life has been through unhacking all of those someone else's truths, beliefs, programs, conditioning. And it's been an interesting journey. And so the way that we've all been hacked, yes, it's different for each individual, but collectively it's kind of similar. I just realized that it doesn't have to continue on. It doesn't need to be our truth. We can live from a completely authentic place when we reconnect to who we are individually and reconnect with our whole essence, soul, whatever you want to call that, whether you're religious, spiritual, or just grounded. There's still something that drives each and every one of us that's not just the body, right? There's a being underneath that all. And when you reconnect to that, that's when you become this truly unhacked self. And when you operate from that, your whole reality becomes very different, because suddenly you're not manifesting your life and you're not creating your relationships and experiences from somebody else's programs and wounds, but you rather actually create your own truth. And it feels very different when you are in alignment with who you are rather than all of this other stuff, the layers of this energetic, emotional, and mental baggage, or dirt, sometimes I call it.
So I love the idea, but I want to go back because I remember two stories. Like when you take the elephant, right, as a little baby, and you put like this ring around it, and then when they get older, right, you put that same little ring. It thinks
Yes.
that, right, it can't do that. And the same thing with the horse when the barn is burning, right? It's like they just run back into the burning barn.
Mhm.
So I think that so much. I look at my life now, and so much of what I functionally do every day is exactly kind of what you're saying. It's becoming aware and realizing that certain belief systems that you have. But where does it come from? Does it come from past generations in our DNA, or is it kind of not on purpose kind of manipulation or people that were around? It could be family, friends, and things as childhood, because a lot of that seems to shape our childhood, seems to shape who we actually become during our entire life.
For sure. And it's really both. It's we do come from certain patterns. So, for instance, I realized that, like within myself, for example, there were certain generational patterns because my parents were children of post-war, and my grandparents were in fact in that war and were survivors of Holocaust. And so there were certain patterns in me that were showing up that when I became sort of more conscious and aware of recognizing the patterns, I began to question, why do I have certain fears, or why do I have certain things when it comes to food or scarcity, saving, when it's really not something that, I'm like, financially, if I'm totally okay and comfortable, why do I have these strange things showing up as fears around money? And so I began to kind of dissect it years ago and peeling away layer by layer. And when I started to really become much more intuitive and connecting to that side, all the answers began to show up as, this is my grandparents' program. This is because of what they went through. And they were forced to save, to live in, because they were hungry, because they were in scarcity. And then my parents took it on as just, an innate pattern. And then it became the way that they taught the family without consciously kind of relaying that lesson. It's just who they were and the way that they operated, because those patterns led to certain behaviors and to certain habits, and those became very unconscious. And when we operate from that unconscious, that's what happens is you end up recreating somebody else's patterns. And when you become a little more conscious of it, then you're able to actually start to examine it and question, is this really my own? And is it serving me? Do I really want to continue living in this way? Or is it something that I can rewrite? So that's a huge part. Like, I came to US, no money, didn't speak a word of English, and dirt poor. And it was something that just, when I began to recognize that someone else's truth was also kind of what I was responding to, I began to rewrite it in my consciousness. And then I was able to start shifting out of that in my outward reality. So that's how I eventually built the whole method, as I was also teaching my clients to do the same, because you don't have to keep living from someone else's truth. And certainly if it's not serving you, you can totally choose to live your own story and to rewrite your own story.
How do you do that? How do you do that in the right way? Let's say you have old friends, family, and relatives, and then you're deciding. In other words, you're looking when you're by yourself. You're like, you know what? I'm not happy, right? And you begin to do that work to become, I guess, self-aware, and you're realizing your habits, rituals, your belief systems. It's not actually yours. You're questioning things. And then you begin with action to change. How do you interact with people that you care about? How do you move in a healthy way away from that?
Well, the interaction doesn't necessarily have to change. They are who they are, and they can live their truth. Although, interestingly, when you individually change and evolve, because we're all energetically connected, the people around you also tend to change and shift. And sometimes some people will fall away from your life just by the virtue of it becomes an energetic sort of mismatch, misalignment. But generally, especially when it's close family members, they tend to shift because it's something that's inevitable. You change your patterns, and the family begins to, first of all, sense it, unconsciously sense it, and second is they're seeing the difference in who you become. So that doesn't necessarily have to change, as far as the dynamics, although it is bound to. It's just not something that I would necessarily concern with. You know what I mean?
Do you think that there's I feel like there's just a split in society of people. There's a whole group of people, it seems like, that they're very into accountability versus, victimhood, blaming other people.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like for me, in the end, I think it's like you're saying, if it's just energy and we're creating and we're able to do these things, I think that the first step seems to me to start taking accountability of your actions and the things that you're doing,
Absolutely.
right? Over blaming other people.
Yeah, that is definitely the first step, is bringing the awareness and responsibility to yourself and start to ask yourself, where is this my story and how am I creating that and what am I choosing for myself? So I developed what I call the STEER method. And the R, which is the last step, is the results that we experience in our life. So basically, I always teach everyone, if something in your life doesn't feel good, you can't seem to create the success or abundance or relationship that you're looking for, reverse engineer it right back into how you got to that result. And interestingly, the first step is the story of what story am I repeating to myself and to the outside world over and over. And it tends to be, if we're truly honest, usually a story of some form of victimhood. And so I realized years ago that that's how I lived. I was trapped in this victim mindset and obviously operating out of that, this constant pity party. Oh, poor me. I'm a poor immigrant. Life is hard. And all this stuff that I went through as a child and all these things that I had to deal with. And it was this chronic, repetitive kind of seeking validation and somehow being reassured and revalidated in that story from others, from friends, from family, except nothing was changing. I was feeling lousy and my reality wasn't what I wanted it to be. And so I just remember it was like this gradual transition, and it didn't come just on its own. I mean, I've read, I don't know, hundreds of books on self-improvement and personal growth. And I just remember having one aha moment after another. And it was exactly that, bringing awareness to what am I thinking on a daily? What are the repetitive thoughts and programs? And then eventually I began to realize that a lot of them were not my own. So the story began to kind of unfold of, okay, this is me and this is the story. So I began to actually consciously rewrite each story that I was feeling victim in, because we do tend to have different ones, right? They could be health stories, it could be love life stories, it could be financial stories. And so there's so many. And once you start to go through them and actually change your own story, then your life begins to show up in a very different way. Because as the saying goes, as within, so without. You may have heard that one. Sure. And it's whatever we inwardly create, whether people choose to believe this or not. It's not something woo-woo. It's literally the laws of the universe. Our reality will always reflect how we show up for ourselves and for the outside world, in our beliefs, in our thought patterns, in our emotional state, and how we program ourselves on a daily. And all of that just plays a huge role, because also it ends up shifting our energy and what frequency we're aligning with, whether it is pity, victimhood, anger, resentment, blame, or is it more gratitude and focusing on what you want and shifting out of what you don't want. So it's just a really powerful way of being and changing your life.
You mentioned also that I think that's an interesting point, because I listen to a lot of people and they talk about, the start is wanting something different. And you mentioned like reading hundreds of self-improvement books. Do you think that that there are people living in this world that don't, the way I see it is that each of us has to journey alone, right? And we have to, find personal growth and development. I think that's, we each have to grow according to what our story is, figure it out, journey. Do you think that there are just a lot of people in the world that don't necessarily want to grow? Do you think that's what, I'm just always trying to figure that out.
That's a very interesting question. And the truth is, yeah, there are people that think that they want a better life, whatever that means for them. But in reality, in some way, their victimhood, their victim story, their reality that they're trapped in is serving them, is giving, like, for example, when people have health issues, a lot of times, as crazy as it sounds, and I remember having this epiphany at some point when I read some author, I don't know, 20 years ago, because I used to have a ton of health issues in my youth. It was something that was so profound that just clicked in the biggest way, where I remember the author actually asked his patient, describing in a book, and he said, describe your disease or something like that. And the woman said, oh my God, I have like a whole bouquet of diseases. And then he asked her, okay, interesting. How do you feel about flowers? And she said, I love flowers. I have flowers everywhere. So he created this association for her. Notice that you described your diseases in terms of your favorite flowers in the bouquet. And there are many unconscious ways that we associate and take it on, and we don't separate ourselves and our identity from, for example, the disease or toxic relationships or whatever the pattern is. And deep down, it is serving people, because sometimes if you're not feeling well, that gives you an excuse to not do something you want to do. Maybe you don't really want to work, but you're not being truthful with yourself. And then that illness is kind of giving you that out. Or a lot of money blocks and people that are stuck sort of more in a poor mentality is because also in some way it is serving them. And they're not really in alignment with wealth, and they judge and blame the wealthy, and they hate the wealthy. And so they will never allow themselves to become that wealth, because it is something that is completely incongruent with how they feel about it.
I remember for years growing up, you would always hear that term, just something simple like money is bad. So you're hearing that, right? It's like, or just the concept of no, or things that are not possible, right? It's like, no, money's bad, this is bad. But as you get older, just, again, when you're by yourself, just try to think objectively. And then that's why, I'm really, speaking kind of to the listeners, like, think objectively. You've done something a certain way. You live one time. It hasn't worked, right? It hasn't worked. So what materially are you going to do different? I have friends, I'll be 44 soon, they're still single. And I asked them that question. I said, you're dating, you see, it hasn't worked till now. So what are you willing, and it's everybody else's fault, right? Like on that point. What are you willing to change of yourself on a daily basis that's going to give you the opportunity as a vessel to actually, you're telling me you want to get married, right? So what are you going to do differently? I also want to say, I know it was a long journey, but congratulations on your new book, Unhack Yourself.
Thank you.
So tell us about the book a little bit.
This book was really a compilation of so many thoughts, and sometimes what I now realize was channeled kind of thoughts, because sometimes as I reread parts of it that I wrote many years ago, because like I said, it was written over a decade, it was really a compilation of these seemingly random thoughts with each book that I would read, or with each aha moment or major shift in my life that I was experiencing. I remember having this thought that was so prevalent for a period of time. Oh my God, I really need to write this and maybe one day share it with people somehow. I never thought of myself as an author or as the possibility of becoming an author at that time. But I just felt that it was my mission to somehow explain these certain truths, if you want to look at it that way, at least they were for me, universal truths, that we don't have to live in this stuck mode, that we can transform our lives. And so I began to just kind of read to Siri, like take notes, wherever I was. And Siri became my virtual assistant. And all of these pages eventually kind of became hundreds of pages and in my phone. And so I was like, I that's interesting. I think it needs to become a book. And then the universe kind of started screaming at me through different people, you need to write a book. And so I was like, okay, I'm listening. I'll write a book. And then finally, when the STEER method was born, it was about 5-6 years ago, maybe. It was the realization that I was repetitive to my clients with certain things when I was coaching them. And so I began to write it down. And the patterns were what I really wanted to relate to the world, that we are energetic beings who do have our own physical human experience. And as such, we do live in our story, and then we live in a certain thought loops, and our emotions end up affecting who we are and how we attract people into our lives. And in turn, that changes our whole energetic vibration, and again, creates the results that we experience. And I just felt like it's so important for people to understand that they can reverse engineer, they can transform their life, even the traumas that we have endured, whether it's individually or collectively. It's something that we can continue to look at as a trauma and be stuck in that mode. And it in turn affects our emotional state all day, every day, and manifests the same thought patterns and the same story. Or we can reframe it and start looking at, what did I learn from that? How did it push me to change? How did it inspire me to move forward and maybe do something out of that? Because many of my traumas were the reason that I was able to think in the way that I think, because I was always seeking answers. And in the beginning, it was seeking more healing because of, the feeling of unwellness. I used to suffer with chronic debilitating anxiety attacks and panic attacks for years. And that was really one of the main things that drove the seeking, because I felt like I cannot live that way. It was horrible. But I realized years later that had it not been for that anxiety, I wouldn't have read all those books. I wouldn't have learned from many powerful healers, all the different things. And ultimately, I wouldn't have realized that this was my path. So I continued to work jobs that were not really fulfilling. I continued to live out of someone else's truths. And eventually it wasn't resonating. So I began to really step into my own power. So I really hope that whoever reads this book just begins to think about, how are you, creating your own reality, and how are you able to change it? And are you willing to? And I give the steps and the tools and the techniques. And it's something that is available for anybody. And there are many other great books and teachers and coaches and healers. And ultimately, what I tell everyone is, it's not about any other guru or teacher or healer or anybody else, because that's giving away your power. It is within each and every one of ourselves. But sometimes you just need someone to help you on that journey, to nudge you, to give you a tool, or sometimes you just hear something and it clicks, and suddenly the dots begin to connect, and then you're guided to the next step. So I just hope that this book, Unhack Yourself, is something that, first of all, I infused it with so much positive energy. That was a huge component of that for me. And second is, it has everything that I have realized and have been sharing. And this book is my way to give to the world what I cannot give to one-on-one, or, cannot possibly meet every person in the world. But through this book is how I really hope to create this ripple effect.
I really love that. And I know you've mentioned also a couple times the STEER method. Just so we say, what are those? What does that acronym stand for?
So STEER is the story, the thoughts that the story kind of creates and perpetuates, the emotions, which are including all the traumas and generational traumas and the emotional state of being that we live in, and which creates, of course, the chemical reaction in the body and all of that good stuff. And then that leads to the energetic, either lower frequency or higher frequency alignment or misalignment. And all of that creates the results that we experience. So anytime somebody wants to change the results, change their life, whether it's get on single, as I call it, as a lot of my single women, this is one of my main programs that I coach on, or it's something for health, wealth, success, business, it doesn't matter. At the root, it's always the same. It's your negative story. It's your lower vibrational alignment created by that and your negative thought loops that you are not aware of, and the emotional state, including a lot of the unhealed, unresolved childhood stuff, a lot of, like I said, generational patterns. It's all coming into play. But that's not to say that you're a victim to any of it. It's simply about becoming aware of each of those parts that are holding you back from living your best life, and then actually shifting out of that to consciously make a choice to change and transform your life.
And I think that if people realize, everybody sees, let's say the celebrity or something, that you're looking up to, but actually what's actually going on day after day after day, or the athlete, right? Hard, win. But the next day, hard. That's the reality of what the thing is. So I always think about like, okay, right? If you're going to be this victim of, oh, I failed, or this is bad, or, during the hard, you're never going to be able to even see the win, right?
Exactly.
So that shift, you talk about that shift in perspective, is super important. You have to enjoy the process, enjoy that
Absolutely.
work, right? And right, because the whole time you're just like, because if you're not giving, if you don't have a vision, you can't manifest if you don't have a vision, and then a higher energy that it's actually, and a belief that that's gonna happen, right? And
For
like
sure.
you said, if you're giving over that belief to a third party or somebody else, some guru, right? Never ever do that, right? That's a false.
Exactly.
We call that like kind of like a false god, right?
And like you said with your single friends, and it's the same with my single clients over the years. It's so amusing at times. They laugh when I bring it to their attention, but so many men, women just live in this lie. Oh, all the good ones are taken. There's nobody out there for me. And I do want to settle down. I do want to get married, but at the same time, like their whole energy when they say that might be, oh, but what about my freedom? Or, for men, it could be, well, there could be a deep underlying fear about giving up their freedom, giving up their finances. Maybe they've seen somebody else, struggle with a difficult divorce. And all of those things are hidden in their unconscious, but they're also driving them to hold back, even though they're claiming that they want it. So there's this incongruence. And if you are trying to attract from that place, then obviously it's a definition of insanity if you continue to do the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. You have to undo the programs that have been bringing you to this current result and bring the awareness to why you're, again, if you're single, or if your business is not moving the way that you want, is it something from your childhood? Is this something that you're reliving someone else's truths? Is this something that you have witnessed and took on as a possibility for yourself? And so now you will be recreating that from that perspective. So it definitely creates results for people.
I also kind of see it as like every single adult has some sort of addiction, right? It's like, even if it's addiction to work, it's not just drugs or alcohol or something. Everybody has something, right? So I guess we could put it in old bad habits or rituals or things that we used to do. So how does someone, like let's say they've done the work, how do they maintain that higher vibration, or where they are and the things that they've achieved, instead of, I guess, relapsing back to their old self?
That's a great question. So among many addictions, I don't think people realize this. I truly believe we're addicted to our emotions and our thoughts. They become the most addictive thing that drives the rest of our choices on a daily basis and our actions or lack of actions. And we end up keeping ourselves stuck because of that same response to our own thoughts that we continue to believe, or to the emotional state. And sometimes it's a question of the chicken or the egg. So, because I remember years ago when I would get anxiety, like, I don't know, in the middle of driving, and I'd be like, why did I just get so anxious? Nothing happened. And suddenly I would start to catch myself. My body was constricting out of nowhere. And I had a thought right before that constriction happened. So I began to kind of connect, where did that thought just come from? Why did it just show up? And so that's when I began to kind of really connect these dots, that when the thoughts come, we can actually choose to believe them or ignore the thought. A lot of thoughts are negative all day, every day. It could be all kinds of thoughts of fear and paranoia and whatever. And especially for those people, that are struggling with that pattern underneath, right? But in reality, once you start to really become aware of your thoughts and separating yourself from the thought, from the emotion, and becoming simply more of a witness of it, everything just kind of changes. So I was a very anxious and neurotic person, I would say. And now when I kind of look at myself, and funny enough, a lot of people tell me that, they're like, I can't even understand that, how you could have been that way, because my energy has changed, but it's because I was able to really become a conscious observer and kind of like a rewriter of the patterns that were emotional and the mental thought loops. So the way to really maintain it is, number one, to become aware. So you cannot change something if you're not even aware of what you're working on, right? And it's not about, a lot of times people associate it with, I need to fix myself because I'm broken. None of us are broken. We are completely perfect. We've just been hacked. This is what I really was thinking. This is the difference, where we tend to be stuck in a fixer-upper mode of ourselves. And for years, I was like that. I need to heal myself. I need to, improve myself. And then I realized it's not about really kind of fixing yourself, but rather it's about unbecoming what you're not and just coming back to who and what you truly are.
Right.
And when you reconnect to that, then everything else starts to fall into place.
I always think about like unlearning, like that's the work, unlearning everything you've ever learned. And that's why, you look at, it's actually not us adults that have it right. And I always say this, it's actually the children with their creativity and the closest to source. And then also, people towards the end of life, all the nonsense, all the garbage we have in our head, they understand there's a lot of wisdom there, right? There's not a lot of ulterior motives. They're pretty clear. And if you find elderly that are happy, my grandfather was like that. They're just happy all the way to the end, and they just see the truth, right? And then us adults, we're just stuck in this like thing, but life is happening. So, right? Like it's like choice. It's like, or you can live life or you can spin in that. But I want to ask you, Helen, what is something in this moment, what's something that you're deeply grateful for?
So many things. I mean, I'm deeply grateful for my family, my children. I'm deeply grateful for all my life lessons. For everything I have. I mean, I live in a state of gratitude. Like I'm sitting in my office staring at the trees. Sometimes there's a squirrel or a bird that passes by. I'm grateful for all of that. I really feel that this is the one key for anyone that really wants to and is looking to transform their life, any aspect of it, is to start noticing and focusing on what you're grateful for. I remember when I was living in the trauma state, in my wounded sort of state of being, which was a chronic state for quite some time, I couldn't focus on gratitude. I could not even quite grasp it because I was so stuck on the pain, on all of the things that I saw and felt were just bad or wrong. And when you're living from that perspective, it's very difficult to kind of see and acknowledge things you're grateful for. And I remember it's actually, and I've shared it numerous times, Louise Hay, you may be familiar.
Sure.
She was one of my first gurus, completely changed my mindset. I was probably 18, 19 years old when I came across her book, and it's always on my desk. I call it my Bible. When I learned about the concept of reframing my thoughts and noticing them, she was really the first one that helped me to understand that. And the rest kind of began to be guiding steps from there. But I live in a state of gratitude all the time for just no matter how big or small, it's everything.
I remember reading about Eckhart Tolle, and he talked about everything was terrible, and he was just in deep, dark depression. And he sat on this park bench, and you talk about, people maybe listening to this episode and they're thinking like, how is it possible to just like switch and live in this gratitude. But in just a moment, he's sitting there, and this overwhelming feeling of abundance and gratitude came over him, and it stayed with him for a very long time. And it's just like this ability, in spite of, it's not that things are not going to be hard to deal with in life, right? Don't put like pink glasses and live in that
Right.
space. It's glass half full, half empty. You have a positive mindset towards hard things that are coming your way, right? I know going in, like, your right perspective. I know that this is going to be hard, but you're gonna
Yeah.
deal with it.
I call it, apparently it's a term that I came across a few years back, pronoia, because some people might just think that you're a lunatic because you're just focusing on everything right. But it's how I've retrained my traumatized brain decades ago to just focus on everything that is going well and everything that I'm grateful for. And like you said, Moshe, it does not mean that life is not difficult. Every day can bring any kind of hardship or difficult moment. And boy, do I get a lot of those. And as a parent, you know, it's always challenging, and yet so gratifying. And so it's what you choose to focus on. And I always choose to remain with my focus on the positive, on the love, on the abundance of everything in the universe. And so I just find that it's essential to be very aware of what you're giving your attention and your energy to, because energy flows where your attention goes. So if your attention is, oh, poor me, this hurts, no money in a bank account, you know, life sucks, I'm single, all these things, then you're just continually bringing your vibration down. But more importantly, you're still recreating from that version of you. So if you're looking to change something, change your focus. And the easiest way is to start to notice what you're grateful for. And depending on what you're trying to manifest, start to shift toward that.
I love that. And Helen, what is something about yourself that people don't know?
Well, I guess for many, it's a surprise that I was an immigrant, didn't speak any English, came to US as a teenager. So that's something that probably a lot of people don't know, even though I share it, but it's like on podcasts and things like that. So a lot of people don't know that I was completely dirt poor. And it's always funny to me that people kind of look at you today in this version of you and make all kinds of assumptions. And to me, it's just amusing how we judge and assign meaning. And that's a huge part about the whole STEER method and everything I teach is what meaning are you assigning to something, someone? So that's something, don't judge a book by its cover because you never know what led them to that. I love playing piano, and my, I guess, hobby passion is singing on stage. I love it. It makes me feel like fish in the water.
No, music is the answer. I always say that's music and food. It brings people together, right?
The kid playing piano and singing was actually, I realized it later in life, that was my emotional release and sort of escape from pain, from fear, from trauma. I would just sit at the piano, play and sing, and I would disappear. And everything would somehow be okay in that moment.
That's beautiful. I want to say thank you so much, Helen. It's really been insightful and really appreciate it. How could people get your book and follow you on social?
Yeah, thank you, Moshe. It's been a great conversation. The book is available Amazon and Barnes & Nobles on Kindle. You could choose whatever version. The hardcover is my most exciting version, is full color. The soft paperback is black and white, and then there's Kindle. So it's all available. And actually, there's going to be a workbook coming out soon. My team is almost done with that. It's been another gigantic project. So that should be an exciting sort of companion for the book for those that want to do journaling and exercises to help themselves. And otherwise, my website is healthandwealthcoach.com, and all of my social media is Health and Wealth Coach. Instagram is probably my most sort of common place where I respond for someone. So if anyone's looking to connect, I'm always available and always looking to help somebody feel better or transform their life.
Thank you so much, Helen. It's really been great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Moshe.
Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Helen. Next week, we speak with Victoria Vesh. Victoria is a model, social media influencer, former NBA dancer, and perhaps most importantly, a brain tumor survivor. She'll share her inspiring story of courage and grit and how that battle has changed her mindset forever. Plus, She'll tell us why it's so important to travel, especially if you do it alone. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, we'd be grateful for a like, share, and subscribe. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, feel free to leave a rating and review. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon.